Great, another huge family conversation. This one kind of within, we've done a number of these kind of within the education, political, social kind of history, a lot of different things we've touched on. The most recent kind of conversation we had was kind of covering the Federalist Papers, and we had talked a lot about the history of liberalism and how we've got there. And so I'm going to I think we're going to kind of sum most of that up today, kind of what we've previously done that last handful of conversations into this one, and then we're going to move on to some different things and whatnot from kind of our conversation off camera. So this one's kind of a road to liberalism, how we got here, kind of wrapping it up a little bit, and then kind of maybe getting into, I guess, some of the alternatives that are being posed and why some of the issues we're facing nowadays are so difficult. But I'm gonna, Christian, I'll just kind of let you dive into, as we kind of have been talking about this idea of liberalism and maybe some of your thoughts and feelings. I just kind of want to give you the time to maybe explain to us where it is that you're at and what it is that you're wanting to kind of continue the dialogue about, and then what you're really kind of looking to get out of what we've done and where we're going, and then why we're going to have the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, for all of it's so funny because we hit record and then it's like I feel my personality change a little bit, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I gotta calm down just a tad. For everybody that missed it, I was just on a ranting lunatic tirade to Andrew about all the things I want to talk about today, and now I have to calm down and be presentable, and it's just kind of funny. So one of the things, I mean, this isn't directly related, but something that I've had to work on for a long time is there's all sorts of things, that I learn or read, and it makes me, it generates an emotional reaction. And I think the reactivity is something that is a good thing to paper and to really sit and think about. And one of the things that's helped me actually is I love getting just on ChatGPT and I'll tell it to reason against me. I'm like, well, here's why it's wrong. And it'll be like, yeah, okay, that's true. I hear your point, but what about this? And I'm like, ooh, well, maybe I do need to think about that a little more. And it helps kind of maybe balance it out's the right word, maybe not, but it helps. It just kind of pushes back in a less emotional way when I'm feeding it emotion. So I think that that's a good tool. Um,
As a
sec,
plug real fast, I along with the emotions, Mom and I actually just recorded the last week and then this week all
uh,
about emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, and emotional um, um,
don't send me that one. I don't need any advice on that.
but I'm just saying it's kind of funny that you said that, because that's so I actually caught myself today doing that on camera, is that she had said a word that would make you upset as well. And if you really want to know what it is, then you could go look. And I kind of got all hot and bothered a little bit about it. And she even called me out. She was like, "Yeah, I know. I was kind of hoping I would elicit that response and whatnot." And so, anyways, I we were just talking about it. If anybody wants to go watch that, go to the Marriage and Family and look at the emotional leadership videos. Anyways, continue. Yeah,
Um, well, that's funny. Nice little segue into your other video.
that's right.
Um, there, a lot of the stuff I wrote down, I spent like an hour and a half just writing stuff. I ended up with like 5 or 6 pages, single space stuff I emailed over to you. And anyway, it's fun to be able to do that and then go back through and reread. And it's like, oh, I don't know if that makes sense. Oh, I don't know if that's right. Um, anyway, so lots of tools to be able to kind of self-correct a little bit, especially doing something like this where it's like we're really just trying to learn. We're building arguments, and that's important. And we're not going to, fall over or shatter when people push against us, but it's important to recognize that you're not right about all sorts of things all the time. So, but nice segue in today. I do think I'm right about this one today. So, um, both sides of my mouth. Um, Last time, we talked about the Federalist Papers. I think they're a great read. I think it's important well, I think it's good to read all this stuff. You should go read Locke. You should read Rousseau. You should read Montesquieu. You should read all sorts of stuff. That stuff is just really hard to read. Still think you should do it. The Federalist Papers, it's a little bit dry. I mean, geez, they're 200 plus years old now. So
Yeah.
it's hard to read some of that language. Even in school, I'm like, holy crap, a case from 1820. Good night. Chat GPT, help me out. So I still think that's important, but reading those is important. You learn the language and you can directly see some of the overlap between what they're saying and the ideas or the principles that are being put forth during that Enlightenment era. I think that is really important. And I think that bolsters the argument. Now, if I'll be a little more, I don't know what the right word is, but a little more abrasive and say the arguments that we make, I think are, and I generally don't use words like clear or obvious because I think that arguments are often much more nuanced than that. And there's reasonable disagreement. But I think the argument we're going to be making today is quite clear. Founding fathers believed and adopted a lot of the principles that were definitely being written about and produced during the Enlightenment era. Look at Locke. I mean, you want to talk about natural rights and the things that we observe today, property being a specific one, the right to life. Those are still very engaging topics today, and those go back hundreds of years. Montesquieu, the way that our government is set up in Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, heavily influenced by the way that the French had done it, and specifically Montesquieu was advocating for. I think that you would have to be, I think what I said earlier was burying your head in the sand in order to miss that. But, to some degree, I think that's true. If you just Google who influenced these guys, those two pop up. Voltaire, Rousseau, Adam Smith. I think there's a number of them. So go ahead and, I mean, do some of that research. Even just ask ChatGPT. It'll give you all sorts of stuff that you can read and kind of engage back and forth. So I don't want, originally, I think we were going to go into detail on that. And as, things have progressed, I'm like, I don't know if that's exactly where I want to go. So really, I think this one could be pretty short and sweet this week. Give me 15 more minutes and I think I'll probably be done, or cut me off at that point. What I have decided, I think originally I was building the argument or trying to prove that liberalism really is the framework or the meta narrative that the founders had implemented at the time of the founding. And it's consistently kind of been progressing within that framework for the last, 250 years, which is crazy to think about. 250 years that we've been operating within this kind of constitutional framework that was influenced by those guys. Crazy. I am no longer going to do that. I think the argument kind of speaks for the language speaks for itself if you actually read that stuff. So instead, what I'm going to do is maybe illustrate some of the frustration and maybe one of the underlying reasons I've wanted to do this and I just haven't been able to articulate is I'm frustrated with and irritated by some of the arguments I hear that are pushing back against that framework. They're just hard to articulate and really group because some of the language is so, one, inarticulate. Two, it talks about concepts that are exceptionally vague and really squishy. So you can fit all sorts of arguments within these umbrellas. But when you try to grab, there's nothing really to grab. And then if you start talking about grouping things, then they start to, the arguments shift a little bit. So I've been frustrated. And so I really want to start putting a pin on why what we have is good. And eventually in the next kind of couple talks that we have, we're going to talk about the alternatives and why they're wrong, why they're bad, and personally, why I don't think you should even take them seriously. And it's time that we start talking about that. Something we talked about off camera was I read something online. It was like, well, that's my opinion. Deal with it. I was like, what? When did that become the norm? And it's not like geez, talk about a lack of humility, a serious sense of arrogance, but it's just wrong. There are a number of ideas and opinions and perspectives out there that you don't have to take seriously. You should engage with them and understand why you're right and they're wrong, but you don't have to. Something we talk about in school is respect others' opinions. That's not true, I don't think. You should firmly test what you believe against other things you hear. But if you're hearing things that are bad or wrong or worse, not even close to right, I don't think you have to take those seriously. You should be able to discard those pretty quickly. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that we can do over the next couple months is really dive into those, dissect them, and be like, we're done. We're done taking these seriously now. So that's That's where I am. Did that, hopefully that made sense.
No, yeah, I think that that kind of poses some even new ideas that we're going to have to get into, like judgment and discernment, because I think that, you know, I think you're right, where some things are quite obvious, and it's like, I know that that's wrong, and we're definitely going to get to this as we start to talk more about some of these opposing maybe narratives against liberalism, but it's like some things, like I find this has happened often over the last 5 years, is it's like you took a very simple truth and you twisted it in a way so that it sounds like it's the original thing, but it's just off enough that I know it's wrong, but I can't tell you exactly why. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting from it, where we're going to have to get to at some point too. And I think it's something I'm going to have to write down here, is that I think that's something that I don't, maybe in law school you're taught this, but I feel like just the those two words, because I think there's a difference between judgment and discernment. I think they kind of go hand in hand, but there's some distinctions there. Um, but that's something that I think is highly crucial in being able to identify, things are obvious, some things aren't quite as obvious, and some things are just right. And I might not even know how to explain it, but it's like, yep, that hit it on the head, and I should probably figure out why or how that fits a little bit better, even how to articulate it in a different way that makes a little more sense. But that's kind of what I'm gathering from what you're saying a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And some of to your point, some of the things that stand out to me quite quickly when we start dealing with things like virtues, and you have this kind of, I had a professor at BYU that would call them they hollow out the virtues. You hear things like love or charity or compassion. It's like, well, nobody disagrees with those things, but what
Sure.
you're saying doesn't sound like compassion or charity or love,
Yeah,
kindness. It's just off enough to where, yeah, you're right. We need to be able to seriously engage with them. But once we know we're right, we no longer have to give them the time of day, and we know why we're right. So I think I'm starting to bring back a little more ruggedness, or I want to, of we don't have to take things that aren't serious seriously. We really don't. Nobody has to give us permission to do that. So respect, even that's one that another one that gets hollowed out. So yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, and it's going to take some time to get there. Now, to shift gears and really get into what I want to talk
yeah,
about,
please.
I think the big frustration I have had, I think I can kind of break it into like three categories. And I sent them over to you. They're at the bottom.
Okay.
So when we start talking about this liberal kind of framework that the United States has seen a lot of success with for the last 250 years. I think that some opponents that I've personally talked to, I think they don't genuinely engage with the history and the reasoning for the framework we have today. I think that's one frustration that I have. I think the second one is there's a lot of language that's used. It's kind of what we talked about. A lot of language that's used that when we start talking, maybe you've heard arguments along these lines, but we have a system that disenfranchises people or that marginalizes people or that creates a lot of disparity in wealth. And I think that there's a lot of things that are in there. And it's like, okay, well, let's start with wealth. Yeah, there are wealthy and there are poor people. We see that.
Yeah,
The explanation of why, and if that's necessarily a bad thing, that often doesn't get seriously engaged with.
sure.
The history is kind of baked in with that a little bit. Marginalized or disenfranchised? Well, according to whom? Based on what? What is the metric that we're actually identifying? And who said that whomever's in charge gets to be in charge of determining what that is? Who said? Who gave that any legitimacy? And then the last one, and then this is the one where it gets a little bit ironic, but naturally liberalism is kind of this, at least in the United States, has been this kind of anti-consolidation of power. It's been kind of this breakup to have a more natural balance amongst, I don't even know what you'd call actors, people, institutions, maybe is the right word.
Sure.
Um, but when you have people that really aren't after creating equality, they're after power, they undermine some of those institutions and the way that things are operating. So, um, and what I think that lends itself to, or the conclusion I'm coming to, is that people are just intellectually dishonest,
Yeah.
or they don't realize what they're after because maybe they're uninformed or uneducated, or they're just not aware. It could be, and maybe it's an innocent reaction to what they're perceiving around them. Maybe. I don't know yet. But um, what I think is hard for me to accept is when they offer these proposals to change things, the first question should be why? Because we live in, I mean, geez, I mean, pick a data point that we'd like to talk about. We live in the wealthiest, freest, most protective of natural rights and also, I mean, other individual rights, not just natural, uh, all sorts of things that the Constitution and the laws protect. We live in the safest. We have the least amount of poor in comparison to the like consolidated approach over history. Approach was a consolidated like overview across history. Um, we have largely solved a lot of the world's problems. We've had technological advancements that people couldn't even comprehend. Um, I mean, we're creating like artificial organs at this point, or parts of organs. That's fascinating and crazy. Um, I mean, geez, we live in the best place that you could ever have hoped to live. You get to worship and associate with people that you want to based on your own conscience, and your ruler, dictator, government, state can't tell you what to do, that you can't do that. I mean, geez, for centuries they fought over that in Europe. So I think the big, if I were to really put my finger on it, is when you have people saying that they want to propose alternatives to that, the first question or the first thing you should do is approach that with skepticism and go, why? Because we're better off under this platform than just about anything anyone could ever possibly imagine. So that is going to carry with it an unbelievable burden of proof. And that's more of a legal term, but I think they have the burden. It's their obligation to prove that they're right and that I'm wrong. I think that the system that we have in place has not only earned that, but it's exceeded the expectation and then some. So it strikes me as disingenuous when I hear simple proposals to overturn, I mean, an enormous meta narrative that we're not even going to crack the surface on. I think that I think it's disingenuous. I think it's bad. I think it's wrong. I think it's all sorts of other negative things. So that's where I'm at. And
Yeah.
so go ahead.
No, you've to clarify, I think you said the people challenging liberalism is kind
Yes,
of what we're
thank you.
talking
They is ambiguous. That's right.
about. Eh, and I think it's interesting as I'm sitting here kind of thinking about some of the like these 3 points, like opponents, people challenging liberalism don't often engage in history. Um,
I need to build on that one. I forgot that was number one. Can I add some context to that?
sure, yeah, please.
Here's what I'll say. So you're big. I mean, you've done some of the reading now, the books that
Yeah.
we've been reading. There's a few big players here. You have Marx that was around, the early mid 1800s. You have Nietzsche that comes around mid to late 1800s. They're proposing, I mean, major competition towards liberalism. Marxism directly in conflict. Nietzsche is kind of just dropping bombs on liberalism and Christianity left and right. He's trying to undermine it. And then and really just kind of reject the Enlightenment generally. Then you have postmodernism actually developing out of Marxism, which is really just what I think, at least a lot of it, maybe you disagree, is a neo-Marxist kind of framework. But my contention is even that title, postmodernism, it's saying we've moved past it, but I think that's not accurate. I think that those ideas were actually in competition with liberalism during its formative years. I mean, this is coming out through the, I mean, 16, 1700s. Um, but it really hadn't been set in stone. Like right now, like we know what American liberalism looks like. I think we have enough data samples that we could really kind of articulate that. Maybe not me, an expert could maybe.
Sure.
Um, but I think so in the beginning, those weren't just alternatives, those were competitors. It was this or that. You couldn't have both. And how many times did we see Marxism and communism fail? I
Every
mean, too
time.
many to a lot. And we have a really good case study right here in the United States of liberalism working well. Now we have postmodernism that tries to say, like, well, no, we're just evolving past it. Well, I think that it's wrong on two fronts. One, you're not going to move past it. And two, that's not even what it actually is. It's actually not you, it's opponents or proponents of it still trying to articulate or argue that a liberalism should be abolished, shouldn't have been adopted in the first place, and we should have adopted something else. That's what I think. And I think that if we can't talk about it like that, I think it's kind of, I don't know what the right word is. I think it's inaccurate. I think that's the soft way of putting it. So
Yeah.
I think that that is critical.
And I think to kind of build off of this as I talk with, I would say, more high, wealthy people, meaning people who have created a lot of money, now have more control of their time, that sort of a thing. I find it really interesting. I've never met a person who has a lot of money and a lot of time regret the work that they spent to create it. Rarely ever. In fact, I've never met somebody. And I find this very, I see the correlation between the price that our founding fathers paid to start our country and the price that highly successful entrepreneurs, professionals in law, medicine, um, even
I mean, anything.
engineering, math, anything, right? Highly educated professional people. And I'm not talking like people who have stayed in education, because I actually don't necessarily think that they're often the people that I'm talking about, because a lot of times people stay in education because they got nothing better to go to. And by that I mean professors and that sort of thing. Not saying that they're bad or and there's probably lots of exceptions, but I think part of what I see is that liberalism is inconvenient. And what I mean by that is because I think people often, I've heard a lot of people, or a lot of people generally use the term it's hard work. But I don't actually think most things that are hard work are hard work. I think it's just less convenient than most of the alternatives other people present, right? It is inconvenient to go to school and get a doctorate degree as opposed to sticking with, either a high school or even a bachelor's, because a bachelor's is basically a dime a dozen these days. A lot of people have them, and they don't really mean a whole lot in the long run. Still, a doctorate and a master's degree, that actually still means something because not a lot of people have them. And it's not, and you could probably attest to this. Yeah, it's hard, but it's more inconvenient that I have to spend all of the time studying. I have to continue to go to school. I have to spend time at school instead of working, which working would have been easier if I just continued to do that, but I'm continuing to delay my gratification. And I think a lot of the alternatives that are posed, especially when we start talking about some of the social things and political things that like postmodernism suggests, is it's just convenient because I can stay in my laziness and justify everything I do, and I really never have to, quite honestly, look out for anybody else. I can just stay within my comfort zone and be complacent in that. And you just have to accept it because you don't get to change me, and I don't have any influence over you unless you do something that's against me. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing. And as we talk about this, I think that's what I see in history. The changes that the founding fathers had to make were highly inconvenient. And I would even say that those were pretty hard things to do. I don't know that there are many things that we have to do today that are really that challenging and difficult and cumbersome and laborious. I mean, yeah, there are some things,
There's no wolf at the door. That's the one that I like to use. We don't have
Right.
wolves barking at the door.
It's
Yeah.
more inconvenient that I don't get to just watch sports on TV all day. I don't get to just hang out with my buddies. I don't get to go to the bar with my friends and have a couple of drinks or go whatever. I have to, work every day and I have to get educated and I have to, pay my bills and I have to even take care of my parents someday. And if I have kids, I have to take care of my kids. And all of those things are inconvenient and hard work as I think a lot of people would say it. And I think that's at least that's what I kind of draw upon. And I think that's why a lot of people are willing to follow some of these. I don't know the proper term to say it. I don't know how to generalize it in an accurate way, but some of these new ideas that are like Marxism, I mean, that kind of just eliminates ownership and accountability for anybody, and it just says you do what I want, and if you don't, then we're just going to have issues and I'm just going to take care of it. And in liberalism, that's just not the case. You're in charge of yourself and you got to figure it out, and nobody else is responsible for you in a very general basic way. I don't know if any of that's making sense, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I draw upon.
And to be honest with you, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up. This is where I'm going to say, I think I've made my pitch and I've got all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, we can link this or whatever, or have it on file for the kids one day if they want to take a look at it. But what I think AI will be 58 times better by that point. So
Right,
probably not.
right.
Um, but what I think is critical for us to do is it sounds like, I mean, you know exactly what you think about it, and so do I. So in order to be the thing to not be the thing that I am accusing opponents of, intellectually dishonest. So we need to be intellectually honest. What I want to do is moving forward is we're going to build up those arguments that they've got. I don't think if we were to ask someone if we were to ask Michel Foucault or Jacques Derrida exactly what he thinks that postmodernism is, I don't think he would describe it as laziness.
Sure.
Maybe it would come across, to us, we are perceiving that because they're, not willing to sacrifice and work hard, and there
Well,
shouldn't be any.
and if I can maybe correct myself, I'm not necessarily saying the theory itself. I think a lot of the people that are following those ideas,
I see.
it's right, the general population, because in the same sense, right? I mean, the people who I guess have kind of founded our country, they they're smart guys. They were intelligent
Yeah.
people, and it was the masses that kind of brought those things to light because it was better than the alternative, and they followed along.
Sure.
And now we're seeing something in a similar sense, a wave of
Because they knew
movement.
the alternative. They came from the alternative. Their
Sure,
families came from
right,
alternatives.
right,
They had hundreds of years of alternatives. I'm
right.
agreeing with you. They knew it. We don't know what the alternative is because we've done such a good job eliminating the potential to have a downfall. We live
Because
in such a blessed, prosperous time. Yeah,
Because if we were to sit and argue with someone who has studied all of these things and thinks the opposite, you might be able to actually have maybe a semi-effective conversation because they're not
sure.
an idiot having the conversation. I think most people are just kind of idiots and don't do it. And I would say a handful of
Myself
months
included.
ago,
Yeah, all of us.
right?
I think that's the honest response.
When you're just
So,
uneducated and you haven't spent any time learning, you're going to follow the best option. I mean, how many
sure.
friends do we could think of probably five friends right now growing up, it's like we had plans to do whatever, play ball or go to the movies, and they wouldn't show up. And come to find out, they just had a better option show up, right? Something better came up. Oh, well, it's better than going and hanging out with them and doing that thing because it's
Yeah.
just a better alternative. And that's, I think, a lot of what we're seeing. But yes, I think to your point, now we got to start to dive into it and actually articulate what are the things that we're seeing. Anyways, yeah, I agree with you.
So instead of straw manning, and I'm not accusing you of doing that. Instead of straw manning any arguments, we're going to steel man them. We're going to build them up. And we're going to
Sure.
say, because we want to fight tough opponents. And if you beat a tough opponent at full strength, man, that means you won. So I think that that's going to be something important moving forward and that people can count on is that this isn't going to be me saying, oh, obviously this is wrong. Everybody can see that. How could you ever believe that? We're not going to do that. We're going to go, here's the argument. Here's why it's wrong. Here's also why it's wrong. Here's a third reason why it's wrong.
Sure.
And here's why we're right about it being wrong. So we've got some work to do, and it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of it. So, but anyway, I think I'm wrapping up.
Yeah.
We live in a great place, man, and I think it's frustrating to me that there are people that I know personally that want to see these institutions and the framework destroyed, and I'm not gonna let it happen. It's not gonna happen. So that's my promise.
No, I think that's a great place to wrap. Next week we'll pick up and start to steel man the arguments, I guess, start to fight the tough battles. So I look forward to that. But anything you want to say in closing, or are we good there?
That's all I got. See you next week.
Okay, great.